SAGA Metals is a diversified critical minerals company with projects spanning titanium, vanadium, lithium, uranium, and iron ore, all located in top-ranked mining jurisdiction of Quebec and Labrador. SAGA's flagship is its radar project. Drill highlights include hole R-009, which intersected 296.47 meters at 7.46 titanium dioxide, 0.25% vanadium pentoxide, and 39.75% iron oxide. Michael Stier is CEO. Michael, welcome to Mining Stock Daily.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Michael, let's start with that flagship radar project. Today, you released assay results from 3 more drill holes at Trapper South, part of a zone within radar. You're now reporting mineralization in 57 out of 57 drill holes across a confirmed 29 square kilometer oxide corridor. For investors who are new to this story, talk about that consistency that you're seeing out of radar.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable, really. This all started with the Hawkeye zone, and we had some regional geophysics that suggested there were some other larger anomalies to the south and to the west of the Hawkeye zone. And again, the reason for starting at the Hawkeye zone is that we have road access right to that area. And so it's kind of the easiest for early stage exploration. There's an old forestry road that went to the south that took us over to what we now call the Trapper zone. And just systematically, quarter over quarter, year over year, we've upgraded our information at really an exceptional rate. Now, to your point, what we just released in our geophysics news release last week, and now with continued assays this week, we're now looking at this 29 square kilometer corridor, which before that, we were kind of more suggesting or inferring that we validated a 16 plus, like potentially up to 20 kilometer strike of this oxide mineralization. And now the geophysics coming back, and we're now kind of switching gears to that more square kilometer discussion in terms of just how large this is, especially from the surface expression standpoint, let alone, what's below the surface. And our maiden drill program at the Hawkeye zone confirmed that continuity in grade between iron, titanium, and vanadium. Trapper zone coming back with a much stronger magnetic response. That's kind of why we focused on that area for the mineral resource estimate, especially kind of being that 3.3 kilometer continuous stretch that was just kind of easier to conduct over that area. And so having these assays come back that are either consistent with Hawkeye or even superior was kind of what we had expected. And it's extremely encouraging to see that get validated each time that we put these news releases out as assays come in.
The other piece that's kind of floating out there is the Falcon Zone within Trapper, which you described as kind of one of your largest targets and not drilled yet. Why is it a priority, and when do you start drilling it?
Yeah, I mean, again, yes, when you look at the geophysics, it definitely is the largest, kind of when you just segment it off. I think it's easier for people to kind of view these things as sort of smaller independent zones. But the reality is, like, this magnetic anomaly is continuous throughout this whole area. So, I mean, one could argue that this entire 29 kilometer oxide corridor is just one big unit. Of course, there's going to be some structural elements in there that may be separated, below the surface, but from a surface expression standpoint, it definitely is suggestive of a continuous unit. And so we break it out in these zones for exploration purposes. And really the only reason why the Falcon Zone hasn't been tested to date is just because it's a little bit further to the south, and we've been creating these access trails over the property to get to some of these areas in a more efficient manner for more cost-effective drill programs. And that's essentially what's going to be the focus now. We knew something significant was there. We hadn't yet been able to get there to do our ground-based geophysics. We were able to do that on the Trapper. That's why we drilled it, because again, I'll remind you, we started with the drill program in the Hawkeye zone. The geophysics that we did over that allowed our chief geological officer, Michael Garagan, to map the oxide zone through the magnetic inversion interpretation that we had from the surface geophysics that we had conducted. And he was accurate within 10 meters before even the first core came out of the ground. And so again, having that understanding and then being able to relay over to the Trapper zone, we kind of knew we wanted or needed this geophysics for that roadmap, so to speak, right? So you don't really want to go into a zone where you don't have that geophysics defined, especially since this magnetic anomaly is exactly what we're trying to target below the surface. And so now that we have that, we can set our sights on the Falcon zone for, even further drill program in the future, and just validate or just 100% confirm, obviously, the continuity of mineralization along the entire corridor.
Now, I should date things right now. This was Wednesday, May 27th, when you released that news release. In the lead, you did say that you did have a drill program at this Trapper, which is within your radar as part of your ongoing maiden resource. Your ongoing maiden mineral resource estimate. What are these pieces that you're going to corral that's going to go into the MRE? And, what kind of threshold are you looking for a minimum for taking this to the market?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, what we kind of need to finish off here is the grid over the full Trapper zone. And our news releases to date, more recently, have focused on the grid showing the Trapper South. If you look at some of our news releases, perhaps towards the beginning of the year, we were kind of showing the full Trapper zone in kind of the topographic map that kind of showed Trapper North and Trapper South. So you can kind of see these white lines over the Trapper zone that kind of highlight the cross sections that we're doing over the zone. So once we're done all of that drilling, we will then finalize and formalize the 43-101 mineral resource estimate. And what will go in conjunction with that is the metallurgical work that we're also doing as all of the assays come into the lab and get processed. And so, as far as like what we're looking for, I mean, at the end of the day, there's obviously a few analogs out in the marketplace, some of similar geological nature, such as the Tangzhou Chinese deposit. It's about 1.3 billion tons. A little harder to find a lot of information on that project because it is a state-owned deposit. It doesn't have the same 43-101 requirements behind it. But what looks to have been mined over the last several years is about 146 million tons, I believe. With a total weight of titanium of around 12%, 0.3% vanadium pentoxide, and around 45% iron oxide. And again, that, just a reminder, those are concentrate grades versus the assays that we've been releasing to the market is your head grades, right? So different in terms of what you can expect from a concentrate standpoint. And in most cases, and I'll say it that way just to err on the side of caution, that in most cases, obviously your concentrate grade is a higher percentage than your head grade, of course. So if you look at our news release last week in relation to the geophysics, we did do a comparison of the full ore deposit of that Chinese deposit, the 1.3 billion tons. And so if you kind of look at that full scope, at scale map that kind of highlights their deposit versus our surface expression, the continuity that we're seeing in our head grade assays, I think you can start to people can start to put it together for themselves as to what this could potentially become, right? Like, go do your research, go look into it a little bit more yourself. And I think that if we, start to come out with some things that are consistent with the level of drilling that we're doing across this pretty extensive strike, I think that we can put together something that the market would be happy with.
Let's talk about your funding right now. So I see that you have about 10.2 million flow through raised. So I assume that most of those resources right now are going to go into radar right now. And as you move towards, because I do want to talk about the other projects that you have right now. But, given that raise, how much of a runway does that give you, given your current drill programs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't necessarily view the capital from like a month over month standpoint. Like, the way that I look at it is this level of funding is tied to a couple of very significant items for the company, and that is to put a mineral resource estimate over not only the Radar project but also the Wolverine project that we've recently acquired. The majority of it, we're still in the final processes of closing the remainder of that acquisition. But that's kind of what the majority of this funding is for, is to basically move SAGA Metals away from kind of this earlier stage discussion to a company with, multiple assets, but certainly with two that have mineral resource estimates associated with them. And then, of course, there's going to be some of the funding in there that will go towards advancing some of our other projects through, your typical claims maintenance programs and things like that, to kind of continue to develop and move those along. And again, it all comes back to SAGA Metals' strategy right from the beginning of creating this diversified critical mineral portfolio. But the difference there being that we've based it around a very specific geographical location, a very tight-knit grouping of assets that's easy to manage from a centralized hub. So we're able to take this 10 million in flow through and advance it across multiple critical mineral projects. Just some are more priority than others. And so again, to kind of summarize, the current high priority here is to put two mineral resource estimates on two projects, one being the Radar titanium vanadium iron project and the other being the Wolverine heavy rare earth project, both on the eastern coast of Labrador.
I talk about that strategy a little bit more. Of course, so Wolverine you picked up within the past 6 months, and thanks for mentioning it as well too on how you're looking in terms of giving your resources. That is a rare earth project, and then Radar, of course, being the titanium project. Talk more about having this diversified. This range of diversified projects in terms of strategy for SAGA.
Yeah, it kind of stems from just the state of the market back in 2022 and into 2023. I mean, things were pretty tough out there. If you weren't a gold or specific precious metal company, and I mean, even at that time, it was still pretty tough in general. But when we looked at top tier jurisdictions and ones that were overlooked and undervalued, Labrador just kind of kept coming up, and it was kind of part of this broader thesis of, again, our chief geological officer, Michael Garagan. And so we just felt that rather than being a lithium company or titanium company or uranium company, that if we could give investors a unique opportunity to invest in one company that gave access to all these different commodities within a management team that has the experience and expertise in finding these underlooked, underappreciated assets and advancing them through the development stage, that we could give more opportunities for growth and value creation within SAGA Metals. And so that's kind of where it all sort of stemmed from. And we could see the writing on the wall for critical minerals becoming a higher priority as it relates to, you know, these different subgroups within the mining and exploration industry. Again, seeing that you'd shift away eventually from just, you know, people, investors, retail, institution, you know, alike, focusing on just gold companies and that. And, you know, some of this conflict that we're seeing over in the Middle East and what have you is kind of shone a spotlight on critical minerals and just the need to shore up supply chain security, because as we've already seen from some of these other larger countries like China, you know, willing to weaponize these minerals as a, you know, a tool in geopolitics, it can create pretty critical choke points that has a dramatic and real impact on not only just like everyday people in the products and things that they wish to buy and whatnot, but also from a national standpoint in terms of defense and what we need for large grid scale batteries or F-35s, or, you know, missiles or satellites, or, you know, you name it, right? So we kind of had this globally centric supply chain, and now we're trying to move towards, you know, this nationalistic strategic supply chain where we know exactly where these ingredients are coming from, because at the end of the day, what a lot of people see is the end result. What you don't see is where these ingredients come from and how those end use products get manufactured and processed, right? And so that's kind of what I think's hit the market in the last 9 months. So we were a little bit forward thinking in you know, that aspect that this would become a pretty hot topic, and I think that we've been able to put together a pretty strong asset base within SAGA, again within this very tight-knit geographical location that we could advance through the team that we've built out in Eastern Canada, making sure that every dollar counts and it's stretching as far as we can to get the most geological information year over year to move these projects forward.
The business model in the end, are you going to be a project generator? You're pushing these through to development that you said, or is there, you know, is there other types of companies that you're kind of benchmarking or modeling against in terms of, you know, kind of this diversified asset? Do granted that you're in Newfoundland, Labrador as specialists.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I would say that, you know, looking at us, you'd probably say that we're a project generator. I'd argue that we're kind of done acquiring at this point. We've kind of satisfied with what we had as kind of our mandate and on our agenda for what we wanted to acquire and build out. At this point now, it's about developing and proving out the resources associated with these different projects, and then looking at those different ways to monetize, you know, whether that be an outright sale or spin out or what have you. In terms of like putting into production ourselves, it's not necessarily on track for us to do that. I think that there's enough larger companies out there that specialize in that, that have the personnel, the bandwidth, the wherewithal, the capital resources to do that, you know, if in a lot of cases, like these junior companies like us almost act like, you know, little project generators for these larger companies. We just might not be associated with them today. But as we build out the resources and they acquire it, that's kind of essentially what we act like. And so I think that that'll probably remain the broader strategy. But at the end of the day, we've got many irons in the fire with this tight-knit, you know, high potential group of assets that we think we can create value for our shareholders.
Just let's talk about the remaining assets outside of, because the focus you talked about is radar. Also, what you're going to be doing with Wolverine. What, you know, given your funds, given that you are a junior, what are you going to be doing, or what do you see yourself doing regarding the remaining assets in terms of kind of moving them forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, everything's kind of on the table. Again, our focus is creating value for shareholders. So however we're able to obtain that, like we're obviously viewing all different kinds of possibilities. I mean, take our legacy lithium project in James Bay, Quebec. We initially did some work, surface work on that project ourselves, and then obtained a partnership with Rio Tinto through an option agreement whereby they were the operators and did some work on that project. Now we've obviously since terminated that relationship, but what we got out of that was obviously some further significant data on the project, just advancing that through what they conducted over that area, and we also got some money into our treasury, and what resulted in that as well was the Garneau project, which again, came directly from Rio Tinto in a creative deal structure, and it gives another quality titanium asset in Quebec's premier ilmenite district, right? It's excellent infrastructure, strong initial surface results. And at the end of the day, that was one way that we were able to create value for our shareholders through some out of the box thinking in terms of what we can do with this broader assets portfolio that we have. And so we'll kind of continue to evaluate, but again, we're going to continue to do some work on the ground across all of these projects. It just, in terms of the dollars spent and how much time, it's going to be limited on the other ones, of course. Take our Double Mare uranium project as an example. I just don't quite think the market's there right now to advance that in a very significant way. However, we know we've got a strong 18-kilometer strike that is essentially drill ready. So in the meantime, what we can do there is set up a network of trails over that area. So when the time does come to drill that, it's as efficient in drilling it as radar is right now. And again, the way we were able to do that was creating access trails over the oxide mineralized zone, eliminating the use of a helicopter and utilizing an excavator to pull the drill rig along the grid that we've set out. So if we can create that same infrastructure for very little cost, to do that, we can just set ourselves up for success in the future as we build out these programs and find these different ways of creating value. So we'll prioritize Radar and Wolverine, but these other ones each year will get advanced in a sort of strategic and systematic way.
Lastly, if you could provide us some insight in terms of news flow. SAGA has been putting out just a ton of news. You've been very busy there, just with the acquisitions that you've announced over the past 6 months, Garneau, as you've mentioned, as well as Wolverine. Also, you've had a lot of drill results that has been coming out of Radar. What do you want to tell investors in terms of keeping attention to? What's your drill season going to be like? When do you think times that, what do you think is the news over the next 12 months that investors have to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, we've been putting out a news release at least one almost every week for, I don't even know how long now. It's been, I don't know, probably over a year or so that we've been doing that. At the end of the day, we're a company that's extremely active on the ground. I mean, we've ran our major drill programs through the heart of the winter in Labrador, which some people might not believe when you kind of look at the area on the map that it is and the level of snow and just conditions out there. But again, it's kind of how we've set up these projects with the infrastructure that we have, allowing us to do that. And at the end of the day, when you're a busy company, I think it's super important to keep our investors, and whether current investors or new investors, apprised as to what it is that we're doing. And so we're going to continue to do that, hopefully each week moving forward. And so big catalyst, big items to kind of pay attention to, of course, is the further results that are coming out. I mean, in the release that we put out this morning, May 27th, we indicated that we had another set of assays that we just received from the lab. So we're just working through that right now, and we'll be putting that release together to hopefully put out next week. And that's going to continue on because we just announced up to 38, and we've got 57 holes to report on as of right now. We're going to have 2 drills running here pretty soon on the radar project, which means we're going to have 400 meters of core coming out pretty much every day until the mineral resource estimate drill program is done. So you're going to have a lot of assay results to come. You're going to have a lot of just drilling updates to come. We've got metallurgical work that we'll be able to report on soon. We're going to be starting our program on the Wolverine project, the heavy rare earth asset that's about 12 kilometers from the coast of Labrador there, starting this summer. And then, as we drill out that, again, you're going to have news on drilling, you're going to have news on assays. And then all to say that, again, we're working to put on mineral resource estimates on both of those projects. So you've got that news to look forward to, hopefully for the latter part of 2026 and into Q4. And then everything else in between that we're doing on our other assets. So again, our goal is to keep everyone well informed as to what we're doing and to continue to put out great results. And that's what we endeavor to do. And, pretty big stuff coming here, I would say, over the next 6 to 12 months.
Michael Stier, thanks for speaking with Mining Stock Daily.
Absolutely. Thanks so much again for having me on. Appreciate it.
The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.